Thanks so much for being with us here on Atlanta News First Plus. I'm Joy Lim Nakrin, joined today by attorney Josh Schiffer.
Hey, y'all, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much, Joy,
Thank
for
you.
the invitation.
Thank you so much for being here, Josh. So we brought you here to talk about some important legal stories that we are following. We are following the latest on the YSL trial, and I'm going to get to that in just a moment because there have been some brand new developments, namely Lil Woody testifying that he believes that the state leaked video of a police interrogation. We're going to get into that, but really the big story that we have been following is what happened with this deadly explosion at a Delta facility that killed 2 people and injured another. We reported this to you as breaking news yesterday, and 2 Delta maintenance workers were killed in this, and a third badly injured at this explosion near Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. So Atlanta News First reporter Rebecca Schramm has more, as we're now hearing from family members of one of the victims.
One victim was in his 50s, the other in his 30s. They were working at a maintenance facility not far from the international terminal when this happened, and it was a tragic accident. Workers were disassembling some wheel components that were not attached to an aircraft at that moment when there was an explosion. One person was badly injured. 2 others were killed. Authorities identified them as 58-year-old Mirko Marweg of Stone Mountain and 37-year-old Luis Alarando of Noonan. Marweg's son tells us his father loved his job. Delta released a statement saying the whole team is heartbroken over this and that they've launched a full investigation to try to figure out how this happened. Federal inspectors from OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, also are investigating this. We have some audio for you. This is the moment first responders announced to dispatchers just how bad the situation was.
Be advised, we got a total of 3 victims. 1 victim being transported by Medic 2 to Grady Hospital.
And we are working to get the condition of the 3rd person, the one who was injured in the accident. At Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, Rebecca Schramm, Atlanta News First.
Obviously such a tragic situation. Josh, we were talking about the quest for justice by the families of those victims, and we're talking about a couple different avenues that they could pursue. Namely, the workers' comp statute provides some options, as well as maybe a potentially even a wrongful death claim, right?
Yeah, and it's an absolute tragedy when there's any kind of injury or death on the job. And as a nation, we've established these workers' compensation programs very often in line with each other. There are model codes adopted by the various states in order to make this kind of injury or death more reasonably efficient. So what's happened down at the legislature is there's been an agreement made or forced by the legislature where if you are an employer, you have automatic liability for injuries caused to your employees while they're on the job. Now, certainly, there's all kinds of exceptions and exclusions and different tricks to get in and out of coverage. There's also some benefits for people. The fact that the employer is almost always going to be immediately found liable, that's a real benefit to claimants. As an exchange for that easy pathway to liability, the values of the claims are substantially lower than they are outside of workers' compensation. Now, the fees to the lawyers are also reduced as well. But basically, a workers' compensation case, the employer is almost always going to be liable. But the claim isn't going to have as large a value as it would in front of a jury through a traditional plaintiff's process. So the goal for the victims of this absolute tragedy, more specifically their lawyers, is they're going to try to find a way to escape the workers' compensation program and the workers' compensation pathway. Under Georgia law, workers' compensation is the exclusive remedy for injuries caused at work, but there are a number of ways to try to escape that tight grip and get out into a space of litigation where the claims aren't statutorily limited. That's a big deal, especially with a wrongful death claim, and it's very important that an investigation takes place because the facts developed during that investigation will determine whether there's any kind of justification to try to leave workers' comp and go find additional pathways for claims outside of the workers' compensation system.
So I have a couple questions. First of all, we're talking about workplace injury, but in this case, two of the victims were actually killed. So you said that workers' comp can be, if it's used, really, am I understanding correctly, an exclusive remedy for workplace injuries? But in the case of death, is it an either or can the families of the victims pursue both workers' comp and a wrongful death claim?
So the default is, because it is the exclusive remedy for deaths to be handled under the workers' compensation program system and specifications, and that dramatically limits the value of the life. It is combined with all of the other workplace deaths, and it's meant to be the most efficient pathway forward to address injuries and deaths in a workplace. But since there's that limit, that top end where you're not going to get a nuclear verdict or a massive award, it's in the best interest of all parties that are looking to claim compensation for injuries to get outside of the workers' compensation program. So the lawyers are going to spend a lot of time on that investigation, looking for pathways to remove them or escape from the workers' compensation exclusive remedy.
And what are the potential pathways that they might seek?
It's going to have to really get outside of the responsibilities of the employer. Employers have a lot of responsibilities, and by deviating from those, or if there were actions outside the scope of employment, those are some of the pathways forward to get outside of workers' compensation and do a more traditional wrongful death. That's not something that's going to be decided immediately. This is going to take some time. Anytime there's a death, there's going to be an investigation. That investigation, it's not just showing up and saying, hey, let's do an investigation. Delta is looking at substantial liability. We keep talking about Delta being the responsible employer, but I'd almost guarantee that this shop on the Delta campus working in and around Delta probably isn't the main Delta entity. It's likely a sub-entity or some sort of associated business that runs the tire inspection, retread, and other work down at this facility.
And
so while it might feed up to Delta, there are a lot of different hurdles to mount in pursuing appropriate justice.
And none of this would preclude criminal charges, correct?
No, criminal charges would be completely and totally independent of the civil system. Criminal charges are the exclusive province of law enforcement. What happens when there is a death is there's basically a mandatory investigation. If facts are developed during that investigation that show potentials for criminal liability, law enforcement will then direct additional resources to research and investigate whether something criminal may have occurred. That eventual charging decision is left to either some detectives at the law enforcement group, the local district attorney, or, in addition, we've got the overlay of federal authorities. Federal authorities are definitely going to be interested in any kind of substantive incident involving injuries or death that is related to airlines and the Federal Aviation Administration and their industries. So I expect a multi-level investigation that's very thorough, getting to the bottom of what happened.
Yes, absolutely. I want to change topics here and ask you a bit about the YSL trial and what's been happening there, because today we heard Lil Woody, Kenneth Copeland is his real name, back on the stand. And he's, of course, been a key prosecution witness, and the defense has been cross-examining him. Brian Steele, the attorney for Young Thug, Jeffrey Williams. And today he testified that he believes the state leaked police interrogation video. What's your comment on that? What is your response to that, Josh?
I can't get away. This is the most gripping case, and Woody is a unique witness, unlike anything I've seen in 25 years of doing this. And thankfully, we've got some amazing lawyers in that courtroom. Woody is of the opinion, and I think it's his prerogative and his privilege to tell everybody, hey, the state released this interrogation video. By doing that, it fell into the hands of people that may want to harm me. So I'm really scared if I'm Woody. Woody believes, and it's absolutely logical, that the state could have released that video on purpose to put him under threat, to scare him, to give him an inducement to come into the warm embrace of the state for protection and support, because then he gets all kinds of benefits, including things like the immunity deal that we've seen so much discussion regarding.
Yeah, and he even testified that he looked into a legal team to, basically investigate and see if there was any kind of legal recourse for the suspected leak.
Absolutely. He has civil rights. Even though he has been investigated and gone to prison, you never relinquish your civil rights. And if the state has taken an action to fundamentally suppress or harm you, one of your fundamental civil rights, there's an action that can be brought. In the way that Fulton County does RICO and gangs, this really is looking like an organized effort to squeeze witnesses, which is, of course, proper to a degree. You've just got to mind all the ethics involved. And the state doesn't owe a specific duty that's outstanding to Woody beyond what they owe a duty to any person in the community. And remember, we're all suspects out there of something. That's the prerogative of our state law enforcement and prosecuting agencies. They get to decide who's a suspect and who isn't. So I think Woody did a great job under a withering cross-examination after days and days of direct. I cannot look away. This is one of the most important junctures within the entire YSL trial.
Yeah, speaking of the YSL trial, which is historically long, we got a statement today from Courtney Kramer, who's challenging DA Fonnie Willis for the district attorney position, saying, quote, "I am absolutely dumbfounded as to the motives in spending endless amounts of taxpayer dollars on a prosecution that is based almost entirely on witnesses with no credibility." And she says she wants to put an end to it. What's your response to that?
It's a very strong and logical argument that appeals to a lot of people in Fulton County who look at what's happening and scratch their heads. We've all watched Fulton County struggle through the COVID emergency. We have been dealing with substantial systematic problems in criminal justice in Fulton County for as long as I've been a practitioner. And just recently, the county commission turned around and told our sheriff, no, you're not getting a new jail. Here's a $300 million Band-Aid, and we understand that the jail is literally being turned into weapons to attack other inmates, by inmates in the jail. So there's a whole lot of politics involving asset allocation at hand when we talk about criminal justice in Fulton County. Courtney Kramer comes to this race as a decided underdog, facing elected DA Fonnie Willis, who replaced longtime Fulton County District Attorney Paul Howard in the last election cycle. Fonnie Willis has decided to use her resources, which she has complete control and discretion over, to pursue the YSL case. That case, I don't believe anybody disagrees. It has spun wildly out of control into a size that no one expected. This is the longest trial case in Georgia history. It's going to have a record that will take months to compile, and the guaranteed appeals heading for our Georgia Court of Appeals will be immense, likely record-breaking. So it's a perfectly reasonable question for Courtney Kramer to ask as a candidate for Fulton County DA, why are we using these resources this way? Fonnie Willis is getting attacked not just from Courtney Kramer, but from the entire rest of the criminal justice community over how this trial specifically has unfolded, given the enormous resources that have been poured into it. We're looking at a bill in the multiple millions, and while no one discounts the importance of prosecuting violent crime by going against the organizations that she believes are criminal gangs that are harming our community, that's a really important obligation Fonnie Willis made a lot of promises about. But looking at how the situation is unfolding, I have big questions as to whether that was the right asset allocation or not. Courtney Kramer is going to win a lot of fans by attacking DA Willis over her insistence on prosecuting the YSL matter.
All right, thank you so much. Criminal defense attorney Josh Schiffer joining us. And Josh, if maybe, whenever you're on, people are always like, who's that? What does he do? So please tell the people, tell us about your law practice. What kind of cases are you taking?
I've heard it. Believe it or not, we are actually going to build a website now. I had one for years, and then basically turned it off because I stay super busy. And I love this stuff. If you want to reach me, just Google Joshua Schiffer. It will eventually get you to a phone number that will eventually get through some gatekeepers and get to me, because I love talking with people and I love, answering questions. That's why I enjoy your invitation so much, Joy. I'm so interested in this stuff. And I also just love people following me on social media. I'm a Twitter person, so you can always